The Spirit's address to Smyrna, chapter 2, verses 8 to 11. Smyrna and Laodicea contrasted. The briefest of these church addresses is that to Smyrna, the longest that to Thyatira. Smyrna is wholly commended, and not one word of reproach or censure is addressed to it. Laodicea is in every respect blamed, and not one word of commendation or praise is bestowed. Again, the poverty and tribulation of Smyrna stand out in marked contrast with the rich and self-satisfied condition of Laodicea. There is but one other church not censured, namely Philadelphia. It must not, however, be supposed that there was nothing wrong in these unblamed assemblies. Only the characteristic church states represented by them were suffering, Smyrna, and weakness, Philadelphia. A child in affliction or in bodily weakness is spared words of censure, and surely our God is not less gracious than an earthly parent. Consolation in tribulation. Verse 8. And to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These things says the first and the last, who became dead and lived. Declension from first love had set in. The angel of the church in Ephesus had fallen, verse 5, not, however, from Christ's right hand, but from love, whilst preserving doctrinal faithfulness and walking blameless in outward consistency. But the moral springs of action were relaxed, and Ephesian church life thereby robbed of its fragrance. This consideration brings us to the second distinguishing church period, one of tribulation. The angel, the church's representative, is addressed in words of rich and gracious consolation. The full blast of imperial pagan persecution was being endured. For about 250 years, with occasional lulls when the ruthless hand of the persecutor was stayed, the church was passing through a baptism of blood, and this in order to rekindle the smouldering flame of love well nigh extinguished. What the suffering church was to the Lord is imaged in the meaning of Smyrna, myrrh, a well-known fragrant perfume, a sacred one, moreover, Exodus 30, verse 23, also one of the love perfumes of the spouse in the Canticles. The consolation that suited the seer, Revelation 1, verses 17 and 18, became the consolation of the church. We have here the same combination of divine and human predicates which characterized Christ in the glorious vision of his person as beheld by John. The first and the last is one of the grandest of divine titles, a rock against which the utmost power of the enemy is futile. As the first, he is before all in time, and above all as supreme. As the last, he is after all, closing all up, for to him all tend. He is eternal in his being, but he stooped to die. Death had no claim on him. He, the first and the last, Jehovah's special title, Isaiah chapters 41 to 48, became dead. He breasted the waves of death. He rose out of it and lives to die no more. This, then, was their strong consolation. The one who died and lives is none other than Jehovah in the truth of his being, the self-existing one. We have had the glory of the speaker, what he was as God, and what he became as man. Now we are to listen to his consoling and animating message. A message. Verse 9. I know thy tribulation and thy poverty, but thou art rich, and the railing of those who say that they themselves are Jews and are not, but a synagogue of Satan. In the Authorized Version we read, I know thy works. The word works should be deleted according to the critics. Besides, it is to suffering and not to works that prominence is given in the message. I know. What a tower of strength to an afflicted saint and church. The one in whose person are combined at once the greatness of the Godhead and the sympathy of the one who has been in the utmost depths of suffering and death, says, I know thy tribulation and thy poverty. The measure, character, and duration of every phase of trial are known to him. There is not a tear too many, not a blow too severe. The hardness, the unbrokenness of spirit, the self-confidence have to be broken down. We flourish best in suffering. Jacob was a better man morally after the night of wrestling than before it. Genesis 32, verses 24 to 32. Paul was kept humble and lowly by that continual reminder, whatever it was, a thorn in the flesh. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7. But he also knows our poverty. Not many grandees are numbered amongst the Lord's people. The Hebrew believers took joyfully the spoiling of their goods. Hebrews 10, verse 34. Confiscation of goods and property, either to the imperial treasury or to those base enough to inform against the Christians, generally followed apprehension. But, says the Lord, thou art rich. Our treasure is in heaven. Our inheritance is there. An inventory of Christian wealth is furnished in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 21 to 23. Our origin is of God, 1 Corinthians 1, verse 30. Our position, sons of God, Romans 8, verse 14. Our dignity, kingly authority, Revelation 1, verse 6. Our destiny, conformity to God's Son, Romans 8, verse 29. Our wealth, limited only by Christ's millennial and eternal portion, Ephesians 1, verses 10 and 11. Truly, the church is rich, whatever its poverty on earth may be. Endowed with the love and riches of Christ, which are enduring and placed beyond the possibility of loss or corruption, we may well triumph in him who knows not only our tribulation and poverty, but knowing all, pronounces us rich. Not only was the church suffering from the pagan world without, but also from an enemy of a religious character within. There was a company, it would seem, not really Jews, which took up the place and pretension of the Jews to be alone God's people on earth. We saw a company of higher clergy in Ephesus, verse 2, whose proud and lofty pretensions were exposed, and the pretenders styled liars. That movement for the time was crushed. But now a movement of a similar character, although on a lower scale, is again in evidence. Arrogant claims to be the church, to be alone God's people, have been repeated again and again since the Smyrnian era, sometimes on a large scale, at other times on a smaller one. This body of religious pretenders railed against the suffering church. False accusations and contempt were the cruel work of these religious people. What were they in his sight? A synagogue of Satan. The two names Satan and devil are employed in the Revelation, as everywhere else in Scripture, with propriety and precision. The former means adversary, the latter slanderer. To the church he is both. Satan the adversary set up a heretical party in direct antagonism to the lowly and suffering position of the church. The devil, the calumniator, forged lies and all manner of false accusations against God's saints, and succeeded, too, in getting the heathen powers to believe them, and thus he became the real author and source of the 10 persecutions. 10 legal outbursts of rage and fury against the Church, which were only stopped on the accession of Constantine to the throne of the Caesars. Abounding suffering, however, was answered by abounding consolation, and both, no doubt, were the portion in full of the suffering Church. Christian and heathen contemporary records abundantly verify the truth of this. Trials and encouragement. Verse 10. Fear nothing of what thou art about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast you into prison, that ye may be tried. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. Fear not, or nothing, is a word of preparation for yet further trials, and is evidently taken from chapter 1, verse 17. There it fell on the ear of the fainting seer, carrying absolute and unqualified assurance to his soul. Here it is to reassure the Church in view of the gathering storm about to burst upon it. Tribulation and poverty were bad enough and hard to be borne. But worse still was in store. The closing imperial persecutions exceeded in savage cruelty the former ones. The dark clouds were gathering, the wild, hoarse roar of the coming storm was heard. Here the Church is forewarned and encouraged. These coming trials are traced from false accusers, and from the instruments and agents of cruelty to the devil. Persecution was his work. But faith rests on this mighty and grand sustaining truth that power belongeth unto God. Psalm 62, verse 11. The power of the devil is limited and controlled, and he cannot put forth his hand and touch even the feeblest lamb of the flock without express permission. Job 1 and 2. There is no power but of God. Romans 13, verse 1, whether satanic or human. The use and employment of the power is another question, involving responsibility of the gravest character. God's purpose was that his church might be tried, and that to the utmost, and to this end the devil was his servant. Thus God's saints were purified. Love, faith, courage, and faithfulness were strengthened. The church had a definite and appointed period of tribulation, 10 days. There may be here an allusion to the well-known 10 persecutions, and also to the 10th under Diocletian, which lasted just 10 years. The expression 10 days signifies a limited period, a brief time inconsistent with the lengthened period of pagan persecution covering 250 years. The following references to 10 days will confirm the meaning of the term as implying a brief and limited time. Genesis 24, verse 55, Nehemiah 5, verse 18, Daniel 1, verse 12, Acts 25, verse 6, Jeremiah 42, verse 7, etc. Some, not many, of the early witnesses for the truth, appalled by the dread of torture and death, denied their Lord. Here, faithfulness every step of the way, even unto death, is urged. If the martyr's crown is to be won, then constancy and steadfastness to the end must be maintained. There are various crowns spoken of in the Word. There is the crown of gold on the head of every redeemed one in heaven, Revelation 4, verse 4. The crown of righteousness, the reward of a holy and righteous walk on earth, 2 Timothy 4, verse 8. Next, there is the crown of glory bestowed on all who shepherd the beloved flock of God. 1 Peter 5, verse 4. Lastly, we have the martyr's crown, the crown of life, Revelation 2, verse 10. This crown, like other rewards and encouragements, is given personally by Christ. I will give. Then follows the usual call to hear. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Individual responsibility is ever and firmly maintained. In these addresses is contained the mind of the Spirit and of the Lord, which is one, and is meant for all Christian assemblies at all times throughout the earth. Promise to the overcomer, verse 11. He that overcomes shall in no wise be injured of the second death. To be an overcomer in the Smyrnian condition of things requires endurance suited to the death struggle. The synagogue of Satan is raging on the one hand and heathendom on the other, alike determined to crush Christianity, whilst between the two stand the lowly confessors of the Nazarene, patience and meekness their only defence. What was the human prospect? Loss of character, of goods, and of life itself. To overcome under such appalling circumstances required strong faith and clear spiritual vision, as seeing him who is invisible, yet who is never more near than when apparently his saints are forsaken, and never more true and tender in sympathy than when seemingly he has forgotten them. The overcomer may die under tortures prolonged and gloated over by the almost fiendish malice of men who delight in blood, but he is assured that he shall not be hurt of the second death. He shall in no wise, on no account, an exceedingly strong negative, be hurt of the second death, which is the lake of fire, i.e., the everlasting abode and place of punishment for the devil and the wicked. Chapter 20, verse 14, 21, verse 8.